Hello, Brain Damaged Philosopher here, and welcome to another audio lecture. In this lecture, we're going to be returning to our regularly scheduled anti-theistic programming by talking about the non-overlapping Magisteria argument. Basically, succinctly stated, this argument goes as follows. Science covers the how and the what, while religion covers the why and wherefore. And as such, since they are talking about two completely different circles of kinds of statements and topics, whatever science discovers should not threaten or affect religion in any way. The first thing about this argument is that even if we accept it to be true, that does not mean that we should place religion and science on an equal footing. Because while science operates on the basis of evidence and reasoning, and is the direct result of proper epistemology, religion, on the other hand, although it may talk about things that science doesn't have anything to say about, does so on the basis of either poor evidence and poor reasoning or faith, which I am attempting to demonstrate in this series by talking about all of the reasons why there's no reason to value or believe in religion. As such, even if we wholeheartedly accept non-overlapping magisteria, that's not a reason to leave religion alone. Because if religion is based on bad epistemology and comes to wrong conclusions because of that, then we can still criticize it. We could, in fact, point out that if the non-overlapping magisteria argument is true, then science and philosophy are non-overlapping magisteria, and as such, it's entirely acceptable to criticize religion using philosophy, since religion and philosophy cover the same topics. Obviously, religion doesn't stand up very well to philosophy. There's a reason that the majority of philosophers are not Christians, at least in the modern age, when you won't be killed or cast out from society for not being religious. However, I don't think this argument is actually true. You see, although the questions that religion directly answers in the end are questions that science itself cannot answer, religion gets to those questions and its answers to them by routes that science can criticize. You see, religion makes statements about what exists and the behavior of what exists and facts and so on in order to get to its claims about why and what for. And so And science, the whole point of science, which even the non-overlapping magisteria argument admits, is to talk about what exists and how the things that exist work. And so when religion makes claims about what exists and how things work, in order to get to answering the questions that science can't answer, science can still criticize and affect the foundations upon which religion builds those answers. And so although science can't answer the questions of why and what for, and therefore can't criticize religion's answers to them directly, it can certainly criticize how religion gets there. Furthermore, religion does not just make claims about why and what for. It also makes claims about facts of the matter as part of its conclusions. You see, religion does not simply talk about, that's the thing, is that, religion makes claims about human nature and what makes us happy and the proper ways to organize society. And if you take the scriptures as they were intended instead of reasoning post hoc, they also make claims about how physics should work and what shape the earth is, and so on and so forth. All of those claims can be criticized on scientific grounds. For instance, the Christian faith indicates that humans were created with our highest purpose being to worship God. Therefore, worshiping God should be what makes us happiest. In all cases, right? if that isn't the case, that's something that science can establish, and so on and so forth. Furthermore, religions also make statements about history, the history of the world. And if we can establish that those fact claims are untrue, those are fact claims, and we can establish that they are true or untrue using science. So once again, for instance, the Christian scriptures make claims about what happens in Exodus, where the Jews left Egypt in a certain time period, and so on and so forth. And interestingly, although the Bible claims that there were some gigantic amount of Jews in Egypt, so much so that they actually outnumbered the number of Egyptians, if I recall correctly, there is never any mention in any of the Egyptian resources that we have, records, which they took extensive records, and we have many of them. There's no mention of such a thing, which you would imagine they would keep track of, since they kept track of the amount of slaves and other resources that they had. Likewise, there is no trace of hundreds of thousands of people traveling and living for 40 years in the desert that the Bible refers to, which we would certainly expect if something like that had happened, and so on and so forth. So, although in theory the argument sounds convincing, because science aims to answer as its final stop how and what, whereas religion claims to answer as its final stop the why and wherefore, nevertheless, religion uses hows and whats to get to the whys and wherefores, and therefore can be criticized by science. This is, in essence, why religion is so threatened by the existence and conclusions of science, and why it has changed so much over the past centuries as we have learned more things both about ourselves, about social organization, and about the world around us. This is why we see the phenomenon of post hoc adaptation of Scripture to that which we already know exists through other means. So, yeah, actually, I'm going to make this video a double feature since it's pretty short as it stands. And I'm going to also talk about the reverse argument of the non-overlapping Magisteria argument, which is the argument that the Scriptures had scientific knowledge in them that no humans at the time could have known, and that proves that an omniscient God actually inspired the Scriptures. The problem with this is, on its face, none of the passages that I've seen quoted to me in an attempt to prove this point have actually unambiguously meant what the people claim that they mean in regards to science. They are all vaguely and figuratively phrased in a way that they could be taken in multiple ways. And oftentimes, the most direct reading of them, and the most supported by the context, is actually a reading that contradicts science. This is, I think, this sort of post hoc interpretation, of course, is made possible by the fact that although there is no such scientific knowledge in these scriptures, they're often written, they're often translated from multiple different languages and written confusingly, and in general, any text can be interpreted almost to any length you want. It's just how stretched that interpretation is that can tell us whether that intention was actually a component of the text. Some of the other passages I've seen are things that people only think people in history wouldn't know because they think people in history are stupid or don't realize, for instance, how much contact with like cattle and birthing and stuff people in ancient times had, and so on. Furthermore, an easy way to prove in general that this is not the case, lest I have to go through every word in the Bible to prove that none of it has scientific knowledge that either the people of the time shouldn't have had, or that is just a stretched interpretation. The general argument against this is the fact that we've never derived a scientific discovery from the Bible, or any of the other scriptures. If there was actually scientific knowledge in the scriptures, clearly and intentionally, then the easiest interpretation and the most natural would have been the interpretation that was intended. That's just how interpretation works. And so we would have at least seen a few cases in which we found some passage in a scripture that said something that we didn't know at the time, and we started using it and it worked, and then we later tested it and confirmed it to be completely true. But no instance of this has ever happened. Instead, what generally happens is that based on religion, we have a skewed vision of the world, thinking the earth is flat and that the sun circles around the earth, and that we should wash our hands after we eat, and so on and so forth. And then we discover, using science, that it's otherwise, and the person that makes the discovery gets burned at the stake, and then we eventually accept it, and then we interpret the scriptures in order to fit what we've just discovered. Okay, so yeah, I think that's about all I wanted to cover in this video.